elementary school.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. I think we're ready for a vote then.
Mr. Byrne?
I'm worried about the dog club. I'm going to vote no on 2. I'll vote yes on yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Dr. Dunton?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond? Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Woolbridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McKinney?
Yes.
Mrs. Swarner?
Yes.
Madam President?
All right, we are now up to item number 11, which is public comment on agenda items. If any of you would like to share any of your thoughts with the board on any of tonight's agenda items, please come up, sign in, state your name and address, try to limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Any public comments on agenda items?
Alicia Martini, 118 Blackburn Road. I really like the idea of the rotating job schedule. I had that when I was in high school, a couple of years ago. For all the benefits that you all talked about, I really think it is a great thing. I went to a much smaller high school with a lot fewer opportunities in but we had multiple lunches. So I'm not really sure why it has to be that one lunch period, and I don't know if that's sort of an issue or not, but just something to throw out there. I don't know if other schools have. I think they have maybe 3 different lunch periods. So just sort of a suggestion as seeing if you can work that in. The only thing I think I was concerned about in the presentation was the lack of the option 2 maybe being available in the future. I think it really penalizes student athletes, even if they're not playing for Ridge at that particular time. Most sports nowadays are full year. So if they're not playing for Ridge, they're probably still playing their sport somewhere else. And so for my daughter in particular, she uses those study halls. And so, sorry, I wasn't prepared to speak tonight, I wasn't here. So anyway, so that's just concerning. No matter what, they're still getting home from their sport late, and to not have that time to do their homework or to meet with the staff. That's the other thing I really appreciate about. She really uses that time to meet with her teachers and to get the extra help she needs. So I would just really caution us getting rid of that. And then the last thing was about the demographer. It does seem like our population is going down, but I'm sure you all have heard about the possible new housing going into Dewey Meadow, as well as to possibly the quarry, which I know it's hard for a demographer to anticipate new housing developments that are not even necessarily set yet, but those relatively large housing loans could then have an impact on the high school for the future as well. So just something again to consider. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, then I'm going to close public comments, and I think I can address the issues that Mrs. Martin just brought up. First of all, I have made note to see if we've investigated the possibility of doing a rotating drop with multiple lunch periods, because that might, we did, okay, Franklin uses it. Regarding concerns about option 2, it was my understanding that the elimination of option 2 was just another thing to possibly look at it, that it didn't necessarily go in the line of the implementation of a rotating drop schedule. They're separate issues. And then finally, the Board of Education is very, very aware of things going on at the township level regarding additional development and the possible co-op implications to our town. That is definitely on our radar and will be taken into consideration as we look at our demographic reports. All right, now we are up to item number 12, the approval of minutes. May I have a motion for that, please? Mrs. Woolbridge, may I have a second? Mrs. Korn? Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Dr. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond, Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Holdridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Swarner,
Abstain.
Madam President.
Okay, we are now up to finance. I believe there are, this is long, 14 items for motion. May I have a motion, please? Mrs. Holdridge. Second, Mrs. Gray. Mrs. Holdridge.
Yeah, the finance committee met on December 14th, but I'm not going to be reporting out on the entire meeting tonight. I'll do it at the next meeting. But I just wanted to run through the agenda. So items 1 through 3 are the usual items. Item 4 is for professional development. Item 4 is professional development, and the training topics are FMLA compliance, medical emergency response, teaching English as a second language, soccer coaching skills, and educational technology. Item number 6 is a resolution that's required by the state to authorize technology and security expenditures at St. James School and Albrook School, which are 2 non-public schools in Berks Township. Items 7 through 12 are for existing students. Item 13 is a new out-of-district placement. And item 14 is a donation of $20,000 from the Liberty Corner School PTO for the purpose of installing water bottle filling stations inside the school. The board also approves Liberty Corner School PTO fundraising to resurface the basketball court and install an outdoor water fountain, with the understanding that the PTO will raise all funds necessary to complete both projects.
Excellent. Are there any questions before we vote? All right, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Burr,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Dr. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Holdridge,
I need to abstain on number 11 and yes on all the other items.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Swarner,
Yes.
Madam President.
We're now up to personnel. I believe we have an addendum, so we need a motion for items 1 through 24, please. Mrs. Gray, may I have a second? Dr. Duncan? Mrs. McKeown?
The Personnel Committee met on December 15th. We spent most of the meeting, it was actually not a super long meeting for a change. We spent most of the meeting preparing for the BTAA negotiations. We had our initial meet and greet, which I think I told you guys last time. So the meetings will start in January. So we reviewed the contract and talked about some different items that we wanted to develop for our proposal. And we also just reviewed the list of potential staffing recommendations that would come up as we develop the budget going forwards later in the school year. And that list has been kind of on a number of different committee minutes because we discussed it in multiple committees. And that's it, I think.
Are there any questions before we vote? All right, Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Burr,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Dr. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Fry,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond, Mrs. Korn,
I could abstain from 21, and yes.
Mrs. Holdridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Swarner,
Yes.
Madam President.
All right, now we are up to policy. I believe there are 2 items for motion. Mr. Fry, may I have a second? Dr. Duncan? Mr. Fry?
All right. Our policies scheduled for second reading, there are no changes from the first reading, so those are going through. Our other policy for first reading was Regulation 5200 for attendance. And I want to clarify that it's in a situation where a student is absent for more than 10 days, the regulation has been modified to include a new clause, section D4. New clause requires that the parents sign the child out of school and take ownership of their education during the absence. event that the absence is for more than 10 consecutive school days, the student will be made inactive on the student register, and the parent guardian will be required to sign the student out via the student transfer form. In addition, another clause for readmission to school after an absence will be added as Article E4 in this regulation. It will state that the parent guardian of a student whose absence is described in section B4 above will be required to provide proof of residency to the district registrar pursuant to policy 5111 in order for the student to be re-enrolled in the district. And referencing policy 5111, proof of eligibility, the Board of Education shall accept a combination of forms of documentation for persons attempting to demonstrate a pupil's eligibility for re-enrollment in the school district in accordance with the provisions of section 6A 22-3-4. The Board of Education shall consider the totality of information and documentation offered by an applicant and shall not deny enrollment based on failure to provide a particular form or subset of documents without regard to other evidence presented.
Are there any questions? Mr. Brewer?
I'd like to know if the family is not functional, and the student is out of class, isn't there some way to challenge or at least investigate the absences? Isn't that part of the policy?
Sure. So in the instance where what we're looking at in this particular policy isn't that the student is absent for more than 10 consecutive school days because the student isn't being compelled to come to school by the family, which is I think what you're referring to. This is in the context. I know that Mr. Fry was succinct in reading exactly what the additions are to the policy, but in the context of the clauses around these additions, it explains that what's really being talked about are situations where the family informs the school that there's going to be a travel situation, if you will, where the family's decided to withdraw the student from the school for more than 10 consecutive school days for some type of travel purpose. It's not a situation where the student and the family are never leaving town, but for whatever reason the child is just not reporting to school for more than 10 consecutive days. That would be handled under truancy type procedures.
Any other questions?
It might be helpful to explain just for the public what the other policies were, the ones for second reading, just really briefly, Nick.
Sure, I was going to do that after voting, but I'd be happy to do it now as well. So one of the things that has come up, and in fact our student representative even brought up this issue of the problem that exists with vaping, not just here in Burns Township, but across the state, and really a big problem going around the whole country right now, is the fact that there's a new form of smoking, if you will, that involves an e-cigarette or a vaping device. And the big challenge that we have with these devices is the fact that they can really easily be used as drug paraphernalia to smoke things besides just nicotine or mango flavored juice of whatever kind. We have sent out a communication to the public about this issue when we had a meeting here at William Henry Middle School, right here in the auditorium, on the subject of vaping, and I will send out that a similar communication so that parents have a good understanding of what we're dealing with. But the policies themselves, for the purposes of second reading here, really just clarify the fact that the equipment that the students are using to consume whatever substance is loaded into these electronic devices is being handled as drug paraphernalia. And so there are some subtle changes made to the substance abuse policy, the pupil smoking policy, the substance abuse regulation, the pupil smoking policy, and the pupil discipline code of conduct. And in short, we are treating the electronic cigarettes and the vaping devices as drug paraphernalia, which triggers our policy on substance abuse and requires that the students be sent out for testing. In addition, regardless of whether or not the student tests positive for possession of the drug paraphernalia, the students are suspended for 3 days from school. That's also defined in the Pupil Discipline Code of Conduct, which is why that regulation is also posted on the agenda. To address the concerns of our student representative with respect to the bathrooms, in addition to trying to do some policy measures at the school, Mr. Krause is dealing with the challenge of going into bathrooms and literally finding handfuls of wrappers and disposed trash associated with the vaping devices. And I know that although much less common nowadays, since the traditional tobacco cigarette has more or less dropped out of our common culture in schools, it's not an uncommon practice to close certain bathrooms that seem to be the hot spot where vaping seems to be going on. Typically those closures are short-term and temporary, trying to send a message to the students that certain behaviors are not going to be tolerated. And I know that Mr. Krause has done that with 3 of the locations. There are 10 girls/boys room locations around Ridge High School. He had temporarily closed 3 of them. I believe he reopened 1 of the 3. And of course he's working with the staff to try to be more vigilant in actually monitoring the bathroom facilities as well. So we're trying to do a combination of measures to make sure that people understand that we have a significant problem that needs to be confronted head on, and hopefully we can squash it out pretty quickly. After our meeting tonight, I'll send another follow-up message to parents kind of reviewing the policies and regulations that we're doing on second reading tonight. I'll explain the situation at the high school. I already met with Mr. Krause last week, and we agreed to do a joint letter signed by myself and Mr. Krause going out to parents and kind of explaining what we're confronted with, and to try to get their support to understand that we're certainly not out to make kids uncomfortable, but we need to send a strong message because, quite frankly, it's just too easy for these devices to be used to smoke drugs.
Mr. Brennan?
I thought under random drug testing, one of the advantages was that the police were not involved if drugs were involved. I didn't see in the policy that the police have to be notified if there's drugs involved.
So in the case of, this is specific to the suspicion-based policy. This is not an adjustment to the current voluntary random drug testing policy, nor is it a proposal for a mandatory random drug testing policy that this board has considered in the past. This is specific to the current policy on substance abuse, which indicates what the procedure will be if the school suspects that a child may be using drugs. And in that situation, when drug paraphernalia, which is specifically what we're trying to highlight here, when drug paraphernalia is found, the procedure with the police is to turn over the drug paraphernalia to the police. So then the police have their own protocols as to what they are going to do. They make a determination on what they are going to do or what they're not going to do. That's completely up to them once we turn over the drug paraphernalia to them. Of course, we have to follow our own policies about what we're going to do if students bring these devices to school, which is the 3-day suspension that we're putting in the code of conduct. What the police decide to do once we turn over the materials to them, obviously they have to conduct their own investigation to decide what they're going to do. From what I understand, oftentimes the materials are sent to the state police for testing and then they go from there. But I really don't want to speak for the PD department, for the PD department, that's redundant, police department.
And are we going to talk about the closing of the laboratories later, or is now the time?
The closing of the bathrooms at Ridge that I was just talking about. Why don't we vote on this and
All
if you
right.
want to talk about them all?
Can we have a roll call, please, Mr. McLaughlin?
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Bouldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. Corn?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
I'm going to abstain from one because I really have to read it more thoroughly. And yes, for two.
Mr. Farrar?
Yes.
Yes.
Madam President?
All right, we wanted to have some conversation about the closing of the bathrooms.
Right, so I'm not sure if you heard me, but I was explaining that what we're trying to do is a series of things in conjunction with these policies, and also whatever building procedures that Mr. Kraus thinks would be helpful and appropriate in sending the message that we're not going to accept and tolerate the use of school bathrooms for the purpose of smoking or using electronic cigarettes or vaping devices. So I know that of the 10 girls/boys room facilities around the building, that he had temporarily closed a few of them, 3 of them specifically, not half of them, as our student representative had reported to us earlier, but 3 of the 10, and that I'm not sure which facility he reopened, but he reopened 1 of them. So now there are 2 that are no longer available to the students as of today. And honestly, I'm looking to support Mr. Kraus in what he thinks, even on a short-term basis, is going to get everyone's attention and help them understand that, it's not acceptable to be smoking in the bathrooms. So I understand why he's doing it. I think it's appropriate to support him. It's a temporary measure that's designed to get people's attention on the seriousness of the issue. So I think it's reasonable, especially if it's short-term in nature.
And I guess my concern, because I had a call from a grandparent, who said their grandchild had a heck of a problem in the bathroom. She couldn't get to a bathroom. And I wonder whether there's another way to approach the problem, rather than to put someone into a compromised position who's totally innocent.
Well, so unfortunately, I think sometimes that happens when you're trying to meet the needs of the institution versus the needs of individuals. So what I would say is I would hope that whatever that parent's situation was, that they would address it directly with the school administration and try to understand how whatever their particular needs were are accommodated. I do know that when I received an email from Mr. Kraus about this, earlier today, he had indicated that a particular student situation had arisen, and that was the reason that he had reopened 1 of the 3 bathrooms. So maybe that parent did contact him and explain what was going on. I will also say that there are bathroom facilities in all the locker rooms. None of those bathroom facilities were closed, and of course there's also the nurse's office that has bathroom facilities. So I'm satisfied that he's not creating a situation that is overly difficult. He is trying to communicate with the students so that they know which bathrooms are open, and I do think that they have ample opportunity to use the facilities. I don't think it's so extreme that it's creating a crisis situation, but obviously, if that were to be the case for a family or an individual student, I would hope that they would reach out to Mr. Kraus and let them know what the situation is.
I suspect it was an embarrassing situation for the student in question, and my question, I think, or my approach would be to have some faculty members enter the problem bathrooms and to try and catch the kids that are doing the smoking. I can't imagine to let that go on. Shutting it down is not going to stop it. I would want to identify the kids who are doing it.
Right, so he's working on that too. He did adjust the duty schedules of the staff to increase the supervision in the bathrooms. One of the problems is that you're dealing with bathrooms that have stalls, and you're dealing with devices that students can use them in the presence of other people and have it be unnoticed, because you're not talking about a traditional tobacco product that burns tobacco and gives off a smoke that would set off a smoke detector. You're talking about devices that essentially give off water vapor or steam as if you were, heating water from a teapot to make, some Lipton tea for yourself. I mean, the vapor coming off them is much more akin to that than it is to smoke. It's vapor, and therefore there's often little to no odor. It's much easier to conceal, and even if a student is even if a staff member is standing outside the stall within the bathroom, they might not be able to detect what the student is doing on the other side of the stall. And certainly I'm not going to tell them to go into the stall with the student. So I know he's doing the best that he can, and I think that he deserves the time to continue to work at it and see what can be done. I know for a fact that students are being caught and they are being dealt with on an individual basis. There was one in the main office today when I went over there to see him about something else that was being dealt with for having been caught vaping in school.
All right, before we move on to curriculum committee, I think I was remiss, I'm going to step back to finance. I just want to acknowledge the Liberty Corner School PTO, who very generously donated water fountains and have committed to resurface the basketball court. So thank you to the Liberty Corner School PTO. And now we are up to the curriculum committee report. Mrs. Gregg.
Curriculum committee met. Curriculum committee met on December 8th. For the moment, I'm going to skip item 1 because we're probably going to end up having a little bit of a discussion about that and just go through the rest of the meetings happenings. Dr. Heinemann reviewed the results of the student summer work survey that was shared on November 13th, but we just didn't have an opportunity, time didn't permit to discuss it. Basically, it covered freshmen through seniors, surveyed them on the work that they did in the various courses that they take, and then gave a representative schedule for a typical junior at Ridge High School. And what the average was about 3.5 hours per week doing summer work. There were outliers that were significantly higher. Some of the concerns or just the comments the committee members had were that sometimes students are away, maybe they're taking some kind of a 2-week, mission trip or something like that, or they're traveling with family members, and while 3.5 hours per week steadily is perfectly fine, a lot of times it's a lot more than that, and it's end-loaded in the summer because students tend to not want to jump right into summer work the week after school ends, as well as the fact that they don't retain that work, that information if they do it right away and then table it until September. We did suggest also that a message be put in the program of studies to indicate what the expectations for summer work are in the different courses so that when students are making the decision to register for a course, they have that in mind. We also had Mrs. Hudak attended. She gave an overview of the WHAM STEAM program. Dr. Heinemann had thought it would be wise to do so given the recent discussion about the Ridge program, just to see if everything was in line with either keeping it the same or changing it like we did at Ridge. So after hearing an overview of the WHAMS program as it currently exists, the committee suggested or agreed that based on the information Mrs. Hudak was sharing, we would like to see the process remain as it is and perhaps add an additional section. Right now there's only one section of WHAM STEAM, or it's really STEM, I apologize, STEM running, and we'd like to see 2 if the staffing will permit. I'm not sure if this was mentioned before, but there was a discussion about adding a end-of-course exam for Honors Algebra 2 and Honors Pre-Calculus. The intent of this is to go along with what you've heard mentioned a couple of times with the grading from the inside-out concepts, which is to allow students that maybe get off to a rocky start in these courses in that first marking period a chance to demonstrate mastery at the end of the year and not have something hurt them too much. So it will just be another data point. As I understand it, the teachers will be in communication, and I guess the department will be in communication in January for how that will work. Then each of the supervisors gave a review of the additions or changes to the program of studies. In the technology area, the former full-year STEAM Academy course Design and Creation is going to be replaced by a semester-long version of the same course. This course will be open to all students.
There are courses being added to the project Lead the Way, engineering sequence, civil engineering and architecture will also be open to all students but who meet the prerequisite. Business education practicum will not be offered next year, so that will not be found in the program of studies. And a new Bernards Township financial literacy course will replace the previously offered outside online financial literacy courses that were available. And photography too will become a half-year course. In science, the third-year courses in the project Lead the Way biomedical science path will be added. I'm sorry, third-year course. Medical interventions is that course. Genetics will no longer be offered. There has been a prerequisite for AP Biology and AP Environment change. Honor science requirements must be met. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over all the words. Honor science requirements must be met in both biology and chemistry, or the honors physics requirement must be met in order to take AP Biology or AP Environment. Students will now be encouraged to take AP Chemistry in 11th grade after just completing honors chemistry rather than waiting until 12th grade so that there is not a one-year gap. This would also allow the SAT 2 subject test to be taken prior to students applying to college. In math, there's a new course for the third year of the computer science path and project Lead the Way, that's cybersecurity. And the second in the sequence of the IAT, which I'm forgetting what that stands for. Anybody? Thank you. So the second year of that 2-year sequence will be introduced next year for the students that have it this year. And as I mentioned, the end of course exam will be offered to those students in Honors Algebra 2 and Pre-Calculus. The World Language Department is adding American Sign Language 3 staffing permitting. And in social studies, the revised microeconomics that has been mentioned previously this year will be added to the program of studies. And beginning next year, ethics, which has been offered every other year since its creation, will now be offered every year. There are also new prerequisite grade requirements that are being instituted for placement in honors and AP government. Those are as follows. Students must earn an A- in CP American History to take honors government. They must earn an A in CP American History to take AP government. Students must earn a B- in honors American History to take AP government, and students must earn a B in honors American History. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a mistake. That was, the last one was a B- in honors American History, and then for the CP course, they must earn a B in honors American History to take AP government. And the only additions in English Language Arts were the AP capstone that was previously mentioned in another curriculum report. And then the last item is the first item, which is the SUPA ELA elective, which is the Syracuse University Project Advance program, which is a dual enrollment program. We talked about this a little bit last month. There are really two questions here. There was a proposal to add the program, and then there was also consideration of adding a particular elective in the English Language Arts department. So the board really needs to talk about whether or not, well, let me just say that the committee felt that the full board should have a conversation about whether or not we would like to introduce this SUPA program to Ridge High School. And then if yes, do we want to pursue this particular course? Because it is possible, Dr. Heineman has told us, to apply for the program and then not immediately add a course to the program of studies for next year.
All right, I'll stop. So I read it. I couldn't print it out because I had no printer. So this is going from memory, and my memory is shot. But it seemed to me that we had to jump through a lot of hoops in order to get this class and this program, that the teachers needed to be there. You had 2 teachers, so you may have to add a teacher. They had to
right, they had to have a master's, they had to have 5 years
Oh,
teaching.
let me just, you know what, we should go back and just say a few things. We wouldn't need to add additional staff. We have someone currently in Ridge High School that would be able to teach that one elective that was considered.
Right,
But there are specific considerations that have to be, or requirements that have to be met. The Syracuse University has to approve that teacher. We would have to have a viable backup if we should
right, so
run
you have
into
to
a
have two,
situation
basically.
where someone had to be absent for, I believe it was 10, is it 10 days? More than 10 days.
Okay.
There are requirements that, you know, as to the grading, the Syracuse professor has to grade in addition to the Ridge. So there,
I mean, you know, it's a college class, the parents have to pay for it, right? So it's an extra expense for the, it's not us, it's the parents. You're just not guaranteed that any other college will accept the credits besides Syracuse, so unless you're going to Syracuse, who cares? I don't know who is dying for gender studies. I don't know. I read, like, I don't know how many kids were asking for these gender studies. It seems to me that it's a course that we don't have to be offering in high school.
so just the background on the arrival at the gender studies course, originally this was approached with the possibility of offering forensic science, but there's a 22 high school wait list to get into the SUPA program for forensic science. So I guess administrators putting their heads together saw that this was an option. And Ms. Fox from the Social Studies Department did advise the committee that there is in fact interest for some type of gender studies course. Probably about one section worth of students.
It only, it's 50, you have to have 15 students.
And
right?
that's the other thing, then you must have 15 students.
No more than 20. Is that right? Okay, I don't know, it just seems, and does it cost anything to join the like if you want to just become a school that Syracuse will accept?
No cost.
It's free, you can just apply and then you can just let it sit there if you want, or you can offer a class. You don't have to use it, and is it like some kind of thing? Like, is it
It's actually unclear about that, whether if we applied and got accepted and then didn't offer a course, what would happen?
Yeah, like, is it, I don't know, is it like is it just like you know, I don't know, maybe you check in a box, like what's the upside here? It just doesn't seem like something we need to do.
And that's
Personally.
what, some of the things that came up in the committee, anybody who was there chime in, but the question could be, are we supposed to be in the business of offering college courses? And then what do we do if there becomes a backlash, if students graduate, try to apply for credit and then find that the school that they're attending is not going to accept that credit? It's a lot easier to tell if an AP course credit is going to be accepted because most schools publish that on their website.
Right. I mean, this is like a Syracuse course. I mean, I guess if you're going to Syracuse, it would be okay.
Actually, I went home and like Googled like the dual enrollment courses. So a lot of states have a law that if you are in a dual enrollment program in their state, all the state colleges have to accept it. So if you are in a New York State school, then I think they would accept the Syracuse one because it's a school that's
In New
on
York
there,
State.
like a good New York State thing. Like in New Jersey, the law says that the New Jersey state schools have to take the Raritan Valley dual enrollment or other ones, Seton Hall and NJIT and stuff, dual enrollment courses credits. So like,
But
it's
kids
pretty
can do
clear
that
that-
as well. You
right.
can go to RVCC and take
yeah, and they offer
college
other
courses.
courses we could pursue.
We don't have to
different
offer them
programs
at
too, but
Ridge High School.
I think it's safer if you're staying within your state and you do dual enrollment. If you go out of your state or you go to a private school, it's not clear that many of them accept it.
Yeah, I think one of the upsides is it gives us the ability to offer more diverse courses without going through the curriculum writing. The negative of that is we don't have complete control over the content, which is why the second part of Karen's question, if we decided to pursue these super courses, then we have to decide which courses would be appropriate for our high school students.
We're high school students, they're not college students. I mean, that's what we are, we're a high school. So I have some issues with it, you know, I mean, we're asking the kids to do a lot of stuff, and then you offer a college course, and everyone thinks, oh my God, now I have to take a college course. Because if I don't take this college course, I'm not gonna have the college course that everyone else has. So it's like, you know, it's another one of those ramping up things that, I don't know, just doesn't seem necessary. That's just my opinion, obviously. So I just started the conversation so everyone else can. Sorry, Nina.
I'll need some help later on. So. I have a problem with these very complex, topics and things without the ability to understand. It's not just curriculum, but the advocacy and the liaison committee. I want more detail than a lot of these things.
With the student, wasn't there also a competition that was what that was?
Right, so there's the grading that the professor from Syracuse gives, and then the grading that our teacher at Rich High School gives.
So they could be the same purpose.
That's how I understood it. Yeah, it could be different. It literally is dual enrollment. So you're enrolled here and there. So, but you're not necessarily exactly getting the same grade, because the professor is looking at theoretically what the teacher's doing and deciding what they want to use relative to what the teachers produced from the class. So I think, to speak to it a little bit, I think the reason that we're bringing it to the table at all is the idea that it offers students a way to experience a quote-unquote college-level course that maybe in areas where they couldn't otherwise experience a course. If you develop a relationship with some college institution, it doesn't necessarily have to be Syracuse. Maybe it, to some of the points that Mr. McMillan made, maybe it bears some thought to look at other places that might be able to partner with us. But I think the idea is, if you didn't want to take one of the AP courses that we offered to experience a quote-unquote college-level course, if you had a relationship with an institution that helped you offer other things that were college-level courses that maybe you had more of an interest in, and you didn't have to take an AP exam, conceivably, to possibly I say, because we're not sure what schools would accept the credit, that this could be an alternative for students, rather than some of the AP courses that we have. But there's no requirement to do this. There's no big rush to do this. And we could certainly take some more time to look and see what other institutions and what those other institutions' rules are in the dual enrollment game. Because SUPA produced Syracuse produced a fairly lengthy little packet about how their dual enrollment program works. And other institutions are probably similar, but maybe we like somebody else's rules of the game better than we like Syracuse's rules of the game.
Well, and I would say, we focus so much in this district on math and something. I do like, even though it wasn't sort of unintended to be a language arts opportunity, I do like that it does offer language arts and social studies math students something different that they would have an opportunity to take in our district. So I know that wasn't the plan, but it is a bit, it could be a bit I'm sure there's some students who want to.
Yeah, my main concern, I guess, is with the dual enrollment stuff, because it's unclear, like, some schools said if it counts as credit for high school and college, then you can't use it for college. Like, I guess some schools are letting students take these classes, but they're not counting it on their high school transcript, they're only counting it that they can take it while they're in high school and get these credits, but it's not part of their high school transcript. It's like an elective, but it doesn't go in their transcript. So I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, like how would it go on the transcript, and how would it be weighted for weighting stuff, and also just if it would make more sense to do something in New Jersey, because then at least all the students that are staying in New Jersey would be able to use the credits. And if people are trying to save money by getting credits, they may be able to save money running in New Jersey schools and using those credits. So,
My concern is the broad-based education that the public school system is supposed to supply through senior year in high school. And if you start STEM and STEAM and all these things in this program, and you don't get that broad base, once you start college, at least my experience, it's not broad-based at all. It was very specific and directed. I think the high school education
Well, I mean, I like the idea, like Mrs. Richmond said, about offering other opportunities in other subjects, you know, a diverse amount of subjects as electives. But we have like amazing teachers who could write curriculum for amazing literature classes and stuff. If we want to have a gender class or we want to have a whatever class, so.
I would challenge that.
I just want to say one thing about something that you just said, Mike, and that is that when we talk about any of these things, whether it's STEAM or this or something else, they're all electives. There's nothing taken away from what you're talking about, from the broad-based required coursework for a New Jersey public school to graduate their students. So they're all taking a science, a math, a social studies, an English, a world language, and then they have up to 2 periods in which to add electives that are exactly that. They're electives to address their interests, whether it's photography or woodworking or some type of creative writing or a STEM elective. That's on top of what you're talking about.
You're right, I would have to back up.
All right, we done with curriculum?
Just quickly, so does the board want curriculum to pursue some kind of dual enrollment program, or did you want to ask me a question? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to wait, but that's fine. I would, you know, I mean, it would be nice to have a little, is there interest in us looking at either trying to get more details about this particular program, answer some question marks, and or look at some other options and try to get answers to the same kinds of questions and say, well, you know, there's Syracuse, but hey, there's, you know, people like choice. Maybe you'd like to try to offer a menu of options of maybe a couple, 3 other institutions, inclusive of something in New Jersey that maybe would lend itself a little bit more to value for families, because there is the potential for value in getting, you know, credit for 3-credit course cheaply, if you will, assuming that the college you're attending is going to give you credit for the class. You know, $300 or $400 is a lot cheaper than what it's going to cost you if you take it at the college. So, you know, if there's interest in that, maybe just kind of nod your head a little bit and I'll look around and kind of see if you want us to work on it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, advocacy?
Advocacy met on December 4th. We talked about a lot of programs that are coming up in December, January, and February. Just to note, PTO presidents are still requesting flyers for the curriculum-related PTO presentations. So where they are developed, I guess, is sort of a question mark. I'm happy to do it, or I guess the chair, whoever is the chair of advocacy next year, would be happy to funnel them, I mean, not create, but funnel them through to the PTO presidents, and they could be there, well, just, I don't know, if it's on the master calendar on the website. I do look for them because that's whatever is there belongs to the PTO presidents, but they, especially if there's a lot of times for them to for them to on that specifically. So if you can get fired, that would be great. Talked about Board of Ed official election results and turning to next one. Linda for being for being reelected, and to our right hand candidate, Jennifer White, who yep, she's still here. Who will be sworn in on January 2nd in your meeting day. We talked, Linda announced about a stigma-free event on December 7th. I don't know, are you talking about that?
Well, that was on my list.
Okay, so I'll let her talk about that. Mr. Vegetarian, we talked about Aspen and how Mr. Vegetarian is using or experimenting with sending out blasts through the Aspen system. Right now, they're called SOS Express. There's questions and giggles about whether you're keeping that name or not. discovered that approximately 10% of our families were not even signed up for the Friday folders. So they weren't getting much communications from the districts at all. So now, at least through Aspen, the majority of families have at least one email address associated with it. So they're more likely to get the communications now from the district. And I think there are people in each building trying to track down the smaller percentage of people that didn't have any email addresses, so that we make sure to get those communications. So that would be great. We talked a little bit about school funding, and we talked about how schools can't raise the tax levy more than 2% unless the budget software calculates adjustable, allowable adjustments, which are typically for the things like enrollment increases and health benefit costs. And that even with that, the county office and board of education will have to approve the budget. With proposals of construction within the town on the horizon, Mr. McCartney explained that the amount of money a school can raise taxes is determined by the NJDOE's school budgeting software that looks at the enrollment history of the past 6 years and determines a number based on a complicated formula written within the software. If we were to have a lump of enrolled students, the money to cover the cost of those students would be flagged behind, so we can calculate over 6 years worth of history. When the number is captured, the following budget cycle, it would still be trying to catch up to cover those costs as it looks at the other 5 years. Actual increases in taxes beyond 2% are therefore somewhat difficult to predict if enrollment is fluctuating. And then we did also talk a little bit about that we can never count on any extra aid because we just never know what we're going to get until we get it. So there was also a question about the 4A and making sure that the school was at the 4A their issues. And we just talked about how we appreciate the township community taking into consideration the future of our schools, our district, and growth. But we don't know what that will mean until development is built. When they actually register for school, it's all going to depend upon the number of students, the grade levels, where they fall, the needs and services those students will need. The district hired a monitor looking at projections and the success for opinion. He's aware of the possibility of these plans in town and where these boards and plans reported that and then there was one other particular brought up a concern about the street school storage, and Mr. McCarron is going to really assess that situation. And I listed out a number of meetings for the rest of the year, so just take a look and let me know if you guys want to attend any of these meetings. Happy to have friends help with that. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I have a comment to add on to your report about the conversation about the enrollment in the district that you had at the PTO president's meeting. I mean, I think you touched on the 3 of the really important, factors, like 2% cap and how that gets calculated should enrollment go up, and state aid and the fact that we don't know, what would happen with that, and the fact that we don't have the demographer's report, and we don't know what's going on with the potential construction. The only other thing I wanted to point out to the board is in the School Leader magazine that we just got, which I think you had a copy. The last article in the back is about pilot tax programs, which I know has been mentioned in conjunction with the potential development. So make sure you read the article because it explains it better. I didn't really understand what it was. I kept hearing it being thrown out there, so just wanted to point that out. Mr. Byrne?
I thought the one presentation, December 13th, was what are your children exposed to online? I mean, wow. So they are beginning to ask the right questions. But this is very complicated stuff. And the parents have to get involved a little bit. What are they doing with their telephones? Are they interacting with them? This is back to stress, suicide, all kinds of things. Now, John, you read the article in that Reader magazine. stress. And, very complicated topics. And if we're focusing on the budget, I think you have to focus on the internet and social media. My gosh, it's, I think, causing a ton of problems.
Mrs. Richmond?
I just want to point out to Mr. Word, on March 21st, I know that they're considering so there will be a smartphone smart presentation. This would still be to determine, but it's talking about safe, mindful, accountable, respectful together. Smart. Put that on your
Are there any other questions for Mrs. Richmond?
Just found it.
I just want to reiterate her request for board participation at PTO meetings and other district-wide events. The advocacy committee does a pretty decent job of representing the board at most of these things, but it is exceptionally useful as a board member to sit in on a PTO meeting occasionally, see what's going on out in the field, and it would be very beneficial for both you as a board member and for the board having representatives there. So please give thought to signing up to represent us at one or two meetings through the end of the year, please. Okay. Liaison committee reports. I know Mrs. Woolridge has one or two.
I have two. So, the Municipal Alliance met on December 5th, and I just wanted to highlight a few things that were talked about. They had a booth at a bridge on November 16th on vaping, which was great. It was the day after the vaping presentation at Blue Mountain. And Empower Somerset provided a banner for the booth with vaping information. And they said that an estimated 15 or 20 teachers came to the booth to ask questions and pick up information on vaping. So that was good. And Mr. Krause has requested a vaping presentation at a faculty meeting as well. So there's a lot of awareness, and I think people are learning more about vaping. So that's good. On November 30th, Zoe Pettit, who is a Municipal Alliance member, participated in a presentation on the opioid crisis at the Rutgers University School of Pharmacy. And then on December 7th, the Municipal Alliance held a public forum at Town Hall to discuss mental health and substance abuse and the pursuit of stigma-free status in Burns Township. And I don't have too much more information about it because unfortunately I wasn't able to attend that. And then on December 6th, the Somerset County Educational Services Commission had their public board meeting. So one of the highlights of that meeting, Superintendent John Savage, the Assistant Superintendent Daniel Kerr, and Board Member Dan Quintillo reported on a conference that they attended in San Antonio, Texas, from November 30th to December 2nd. It was the National Association of Educational Services Agencies. They gave a presentation there on the Career Center, their career, the SCESC Career Center, which was very well received. And they also attended a lot of other talks and talked to a lot of people. And they said that the Somerset County Youth Services is actually dealing with similar problems as other educational services agencies throughout the United States. An important one is an increase in issues with students' mental health and behavior problems, and I know that we're seeing that. And then the other item was they announced that the Somerset County Youth Services Commission is going to be leaving the New Jersey State Health Benefits Plan due to an expected annual increase of 13%, and they're able to get a much lower increase by changing to Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield. And that's all I have for now. Does anybody have any questions?
Just a brief comment, the vaping in the high school, the opioid problem. I think we're losing the war, and I would hope that the Municipal Alliance would expand their thinking a little bit. Try and cut back on what's happening in town.
Any other questions for Mrs. Woldridge? Okay, we now have our ad hoc SEL committee report. Is there something to report tonight? I know you're meeting this week. Thursday, okay. All right, so now we are up to item number 20, which is public comment on non-agenda items. This is the public's opportunity to address the board on anything that's on your mind. Are there any public comments made? Please make sure you sign in, state your name and address, limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Nell Oliveira, and can I make comments on 2 things, if that's okay?
Yep, keep it within your 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You're good to go.
One of the things that I did want to ask about, and really just ask why, when the bathrooms were closed at Ridge, why is it that parents weren't alerted about anything like that? My daughter actually told me about it, sent me a text during her break in a real early morning. She has most of her classes in the 600 wing. She couldn't find a single bathroom open. So, what you're being told, that it's only 3 bathrooms, I apologize, but I really beg to differ. She tried 5 different bathrooms, none were open. So, maybe as of today, maybe it was only 3, and maybe now down to 2, but that's not what was happening then. The fact is, someone just should have at least advised parents, hey, this is what's going to be happening. We understand that there's been a problem with this, but as you know, they're now going to there was only 2 bathrooms open. Maybe that's where they would now go and be. So it's not really correcting the issue, but it is really putting innocent kids kind of at a disadvantage. So I did want to just mention that. The other thing is that because we were talking about the master schedule and the master plan, and you did bring up mental health and well-being and stress, one of the things that I would really implore the board to consider is that when you're talking about mental health, please look at the middle school. I have an 8th grader, and when I tell you that the conversation, her knowing that I was going to be here today, the fact that she has 4 tests this week, plus a paper and a project due. This week has 4.5 days. That's what these kids in 8th grade are looking at. She tells me that her and her friends, and I have had many of her friends, they are all, the girlfriends, always at my house. We spend the majority of the time talking about their classes and their teachers and the struggle. She tells me she goes into a bathroom any day of the week, any day of the school year. She will always find at least one student that's upset about a grade. In her Algebra 1 class, they had a homework assessment. The entire class, nobody got above 50%. Some of these kids are struggling. This is 8th grade. What they think is going to happen is that it's just going to get worse as they enter Ridge. So please, if you want to look at what the stress and the mental health, is happening with our kids, don't just think of it as, high school, because this is where it's now counting for college. It's starting so much earlier on. It's starting in the middle school. So if you're going to look at academically, the stress and the pressure, think about it, it's happening in Williams too. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? So I'm going to close public comment and defer to Mr. Markarian for Ms. Oliveira's comments.
Sure. I mean, obviously we have a disagreement about the bathroom situation. I can tell you as far as the mental health and stress concerns and looking at the middle school, while tonight's presentation was specifically about the high school and the master schedule there, I would say that the issues don't don't start at the middle school, they start at the elementary school. That's why all of the schools have done climate surveys with the students to try to identify some of the issues, and they're working on it. K-12, it's not just a high school issue. I fully agree with that. It really is a district issue. So we are looking at all of the schools, trying to address it wherever we can, not just at Ridge.
All right, we are up to board forum. Does anyone have any topics for board forum this evening? Dr. Dutton?
I just want to say that in addition to all the wonderful comments that Mrs. Swerner made about John, I want to add that his tenure as a football coach at Ridge was much appreciated by the parents who had the pleasure of having their child coached by him. He was a wonderful coach, but also just a great teacher of young men and how to be young, responsible men. And it's been missed since you haven't been there, and just one of the many accolades that we can share about you and your time here. So thank you from a parent who had the privilege.
Anything else? All right, Dr. Dunn.
I apologize for making a long meeting a little longer, but I have a short statement that I'd like to make. With regret, I inform the board of my resignation tonight due to my upcoming relocation out of district. I want to thank the members of the board who awarded me this opportunity to serve 2 years ago, as well as the voters in Bernards Township who allowed me to continue representing the students and stakeholders of the district in this important volunteer role. I also want to thank the members of the administration, the many PTO board members and other parent volunteers, and the staff who have made my tenure so enjoyable. When I joined the board, I've been helping for over 12 years in many volunteer roles in the district, including serving on the Bannon PTO board and the Ridge Parent Advisory Committee, while my 3 sons were being educated here. I'm proud of the job our district does first in preparing talents for bright futures, including my sons who are now studying biophysics and electrical engineering at Johns Hopkins University and neuroscience and medicine at Harvard Medical School. It has truly been my pleasure and privilege to give back by supporting the excellent education our district continually strives to provide. I encourage members of the public to apply for the seat that I have to leave open. I have no doubt you will find that although the commitment of serving on this board is large, the rewards are larger. The opportunities to learn and grow through the training provided, both in the district and through the New Jersey School Boards Association, are plentiful, and the satisfaction of improving our program for students is great. To whomever takes my place, I must mention that I highly recommend the New Jersey School Board's trip to the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. I do hope that the next volunteer will take every opportunity to learn and become better able to advocate for our students. As I depart, I want to wish the board, the administration, the families, and most especially the students of Sergeant Township all the best in the coming year and beyond. Thank you.
I think I'm going to just speak on behalf of the entire board. We thank you for your dedication and service over these past few years and wish you all the best in your new adventures. Thank you. Mr. Fry?
I want to thank you all for being a part of this group. I'm honored to be part of this group. I'm humbled by your professionalism, the amount of work that you do, the concern you have for the students of this township, and as an example of this, when we talk about the committees, Karen has 4 or 5 pages of things she has listed, and Karen Gray has the curriculum, and Robin, and Linda, and Deb, and if I ever had to type up those notes, it would be good if we have 2 months to report. I'm sorry that I'm leaving the board. The Florida calls.
Can I come with you?
Now, if there is an opening for like 3 or 4 months during the spring and summer, it might be available, but other than that, this board is in good hands. And you've got the right direction. And I'm just very proud to be part of the group. Thank you.
Thank you. So our last thing on the agenda, first I'm going to say happy holidays. I hope everyone has a safe and festive and joyous holiday season, making good memories with your families and loved ones. We have our final item on the agenda, which is adjournment.
But before we do that, can I just say one thing to the public? It's Mrs. McEwen's birthday. This is what she's done with her evening. This is what we do. This is our dedication to our community. She spent her birthday with us.
Bring the kids back.
You know what's the name of it?
It was a good scene.
So, back to adjournment. Mr. Fry.
Yeah, I do have one other thing. Just for Mr. McLaughlin, I was wrong in the November 27th board meeting. I was not present.
See, just completely accurate till the end. Okay. One more time. Mr. Fry, might you want to make a motion for adjournment? Dr. Dunton, would you like to second it for the record? Mr. Fry, Dr. Dunton, we are adjourned. Happy holidays, everyone.